This hearing of the Subcommittee on Government Organization, Efficiency, and Financial Management will come to order. The purpose of today's hearing is to conduct oversight of the Department of Homeland Security Office of Inspector General and its management of investigative cases. The Department of Homeland Security is the third largest department in the Federal Government and has the crucial mission of ensuring the United States' safety, security, and that we are resilient against terrorism and other threats. Because of the importance of DHS's mission, it is crucial that it have a fully capable Inspector General and staff to provide oversight and accountability. Over the past few years, DHS OIG has had thousands of open investigations that must be properly managed and resolved. Our hearing today will review the number of open cases at DHS OIG, as well as its recent decision to transfer cases back to Immigration and Customs Enforcement and the Customs and Border Protection entities. As of March 2012, DHS OIG had 2,361 open investigative cases. In its latest semi-annual report, which covered a 6-month period between October 2010 and March 2012, October 2012, DHS OIG closed only 730 cases. This is 31% of DHS's open cases. Since 2009, the Office of OIG number of cases has not dropped below 2,000 at any point, while the number of cases closed has averaged approximately 566 per 6-month reporting period. In April, DHS OIG announced that it would transfer cases of misconduct involving employees at the United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement and United States Customs and Border Protection entities back to these agencies for handling. In order to make sure that allegations of misconduct were fully investigated in a timely manner, 377 cases were transferred in April and another 280 transferred in June. While transferring OIG's casework may help to ensure investigations are resolved more quickly, this process certainly must be overseen with great diligence. Allowing ICE and CBP to investigate their own misconduct or staff within their entities could create the appearance of a conflict of interest unless proper internal controls are maintained and emphasized. Additionally, these transfers have resulted in a 68% increase in the cases at ICE and CBP's internal affairs offices. If ICE and CBP do not have sufficient resources to manage these cases, it could result in wrongdoing going undetected. Our hearing today will review how ICE and CBP are managing these cases. It will also focus on OIG's relationship with these component entities and how it can better collaborate and to investigate and manage its cases. In 2010, DHS OIG wrote, and I would emphasize not the current IG, but prior personnel wrote that its relationship with the agency was a longstanding problem due to resistance and lack of cooperation with OIG investigations. Today we will learn more about that relationship between DHS and its OIG and staff and examine ways to improve collaboration from now and into the future. The United States is unique in the important role of Inspectors Generals. The Inspector General Act of 1978 established IGs to act as independent watchdogs over Federal departments and agencies. Today, IGs are on the front lines of preventing waste, fraud, and abuse across the Federal Government. Their role directly benefits both Congress in our oversight duties and taxpayers by creating a government that is more transparent and accountable. In order to do their jobs well, IGs need to maintain strong accountability and integrity while fostering a collaborative relationship with the agencies they oversee. DHS OIG has an extremely important task of overseeing an agency that protects our borders, guards against terrorism, and ensures the security of our country here at home. I commend OIG's efforts in moving forward in a productive manner, especially in the last year and a half, and working with our component entities that are represented here today, and certainly look forward to the testimony of all three of our witnesses and the insights you can share with this committee. With that, I yield to the ranking member, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Towns, for the purpose of an opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing today. Today we will focus on the efficiency of investigations into employee misconduct at the Department of Homeland Security components, Customs, Border Protection, and Immigration and Custom Enforcement, ICE. Mr. Chairman, I thank you for, again, holding this hearing. The largest law enforcement agency in the country, over 47,000 law enforcement personnel, are deployed along the U.S. borders at ports of entry and overseas on a continuous basis to secure our borders. At ICE, the second largest federal law enforcement agency, over 20,000 employees enforce federal laws governing border control, customs, trade, and immigration. These agencies, along with TSA, form the backbone of our Homeland Security enterprise. I want to first acknowledge those that perform their missions with integrity and thank them for a job well done. Unfortunately, we must turn our attention to the few employees who have disgraced themselves and the agencies that employ them through acts of personal misconduct, and in many instances, criminality. Some employees come into contact with sensitive, sometimes classified information, and in many cases our national security interests lie, literally, in the palms of their hands. Dishonest employees have leaked sensitive information to drug cartels, smugglers, and others under investigation. Others have taken cash bribes or other favors in exchange for allowing contraband or undocumented aliens to pass through our borders. More than 140 CBP officers since 2004 have been arrested or indicted for acts of corruption. Many others are under investigation as we sit. Corruption or misconduct occurring at DHS can have greater national security implications than misconduct occurring at other federal agencies. For this reason, investigations into CBR and ICE employees' misconduct and criminality must be dealt with swiftly and efficiently. The Office of the Inspector General has the primary authority within DHS for investigating allegations of criminality and misconduct among employees. The Inspector General has a staff of 219 investigators and a budget of $150 million to investigate a workforce of over 220,000 employees. That doesn't seem to be enough. With the escalation of complaints of employee misconduct and corruption and a decreasing IG budget, it is not surprising that the IG must find innovative ways to move the investigative process forward. The CBC Office of Internal Affairs and ICE, the Office of Professional Responsibility, are playing a critical role in the investigation of these complaints. We have to remember that DHS was only created in 2002, when Congress joined together previously independent agencies that may not have had a history of cooperating with one another to resolve cases. But today, cooperation between OIG, ICE, and CBP is extremely important to securing our border personnel against corruption. Fortunately, under its current leadership, there is more DHS interagency cooperation than ever before. That recent positive development addresses a historic weakness present at the creation of DHS. I look forward to the testimony of our witness and hope we can find stronger pathways forward to such an important mission, because working together is very important, and without it, we will not be able to achieve our goal. On that note, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank the ranking member. And before I yield to the gentleman from Virginia, just want to echo very well stated, important statement by the ranking member that while we're going to hear talk about investigation of cases of wrongdoing, that we make sure we herald the great work of the 99% plus of the officers, agents, staff of DHS, all the entities who do great work courageous work are truly on the front lines of protecting this nation. And Mr. Towns, I thank you for that reminder that I intended to include and did not reference, and well stated. We are grateful to you, each of you and your staffs and your officers who are out there on the front lines. So with that, I yield to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Connolly, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this hearing. I want to commend you personally for your longstanding commitment to holding fair and substantive oversight hearings that not only highlight deficiencies in government programs, but importantly do so in a productive manner, as you just in fact stated, that allows members to work in a bipartisan fashion to implement corrective actions. We are going to miss you around here. Today's hearing is focused on the DHS OIG's performance adjudicating cases and coordinating investigative efforts with the U.S. Immigration Customs Enforcement Office of Professional Responsibility and the U.S. Customs Border Protection's Office of Internal Affairs. However, I believe this hearing actually highlights a far more serious fundamental management challenge that can contribute to impeding our efforts across the Federal Government to prevent and detect waste, fraud, and abuse while promoting departmental efficiency, economy, and effectiveness, long-standing vacancies in key agency leadership positions. The U.S. Senate's inability to efficiently confirm presidential nominees has resulted in a dysfunctional oversight system that increases the threat of fraud and abuse going undetected while making them really raising a question of the Senate's constitutional responsibility to provide advice and consent in a timely fashion. Unfortunately, it's become common for months to pass before non-controversial nominees are given an up and down vote. A disgraceful yet increasingly common experience is that of Michael Horowitz, his nomination to be Inspector General for the Department of Justice. That was announced on July 29, 2011, but did not receive a vote in the Senate until March 29th of this year, at which point he was approved unanimously. Most concerning is that IG vacancies appear most prevalent among IG positions for the Federal Government's largest and most complex agencies, such as the Department of State, which has been without a permanent IG for 1,658 days. The Department of Defense, which has been without a permanent IG for 220 days. And the agency that is the focus of today's hearing, DHS, we're lucky to have an acting IG, but it's been without a permanent IG for 250 days. Fortunately, there appears to be bipartisan recognition that OIGs require permanent Senate-confirmed leadership to be most effective and to best serve the American people. Senator Grassley, Republican from Iowa, stated recently that, quote, even the best acting inspector generals lack the standing to make lasting changes needed to improve his or her office. I concur in that sentiment and hope even now that we can move forward to ensure Federal OIGs are adequately staffed, funded, and empowered to reduce wasteful spending, increase agency efficiency, and ultimately improve the lives of the people we serve. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman, and make very important and relevant points here about the importance of the confirmation process and giving the Department a fully confirmed IG, and hopefully that will happen sooner than later. Not because we're not grateful for the current work of the acting, but the points that the gentleman made and giving that additional standing and presence of a Senate-confirmed IG. We're going to keep the record open for 7 days for any members who want to submit opening statements or other materials, and we will now move to our testimony from our witnesses. We're honored to have three very distinguished public servants with us: Mr. Charles Edwards, Acting Inspector General at the Department of Homeland Security; Mr. David Aguilar, Acting Commissioner of the United States Customs and Border Protection; and Mr. Daniel Ragsdale, Acting Deputy Director of the United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Pursuant to our committee rules, if I could ask the three of you to stand and raise your right hand to be sworn in. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Let the record reflect that all witnesses answered in the affirmative. You'll see a light system in front of you. Timer is set for 5 minutes, but if you need to go over that, that's understandable. We appreciate your written testimonies you've given us. I call it my homework in preparation for the hearing and allow me to have a better understanding and a better exchange with you here today. But we are glad to have you here in person and share your oral testimony. So it's at 5, but if you need to go over, don't worry about that, and we're glad to have you. And Mr. Edwards, if you'd like to begin.
Good morning, Chairman Platts, Ranking Member Towns, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for inviting me to testify today about the critical investigative work of DHS OIG. OIG has 219 criminal investigators deployed at 33 offices around the country with a concentration of resources in the Southwest. While OIG has a primary focus on employee corruption, it also has jurisdiction for allegations involving DHS contractors and financial assistance beneficiaries, including disaster assistance recipients. Both the personnel and organizational independence of OIG investigators, free to carry out their work without interference by agency officials, is essential to maintaining public trust in the DHS workforce. Resolving complex corruption investigations is challenging and time-consuming. OIG makes every attempt to expedite these investigations, but some of the more complex investigations take time to obtain the necessary evidence of corrupt activity and identify any additional employee involvement. OIG recognizes the importance of ensuring that corrupt CBP officers and Border Patrol agents who are willing to compromise Homeland Security for personal gain are quickly removed from any position that would allow harm to the country. So we work closely with the components to balance Homeland Security needs while investigating thoroughly to expose all wrongdoers, not just a single employee against whom allegations have been made. Generally, once a matter has been presented to the U.S. Attorney's Office and accepted for prosecution, the majority of investigative activity is complete. However, OIG still classifies the case as open until all judicial activity is done, which may take years. Although case complexity and time to prosecute may extend some cases for several years, over 70% of OIG's criminal investigation cases have been open less than 24 months. In August 2011, the CBP Commissioner and I signed an agreement to enhance joint efforts against border corruption within the ranks of CBP workforce. Cooperative efforts between OIG and CBP-IA have provided OIG with additional assets to meet the challenge of CBP's significant and ongoing expansion. Our agreement established an integrated DHS approach to participation with other agencies investigating border corruption, recognizing both OIG's obligation to work independently of DHS components and the need for collaboration and information sharing among law enforcement entities. A key component of our investigative strategy is to leverage limited resources and share intelligence with law enforcement at all levels. DHS OIG has agents participating in border corruption task forces in many parts of the country. These cooperative relationships ensure that different law enforcement agencies are not pursuing the same targets, which compromises law enforcement agents' safety and is a duplication of effort. With respect to information sharing, the OIG and FBI have a mutual responsibility under the Attorney General guidelines to promptly notify one another upon initiation of any criminal investigation. OIG timely meets this responsibility. By fiscal year 2011, OIG's policy to open allegations of employee corruption or compromise of border or transportation security, combined with the expanding workforce, led to a 95% increase over fiscal year 2004 of complaints involving CBP employees. The growth of OIG's cadre of criminal investigators did not match the growth in complaints. The increased volume led to increased case openings, and the DHS OIG investigative staff was taxed beyond its capacity. As a part of my commitment to ensuring that allegations of employee corruption are fully investigated, ICE Director Morton and I agreed in April 2012 that OIG would transfer 370 cases involving CBP and ICE employees to ICE for completion. As a part of OIG oversight of component internal affairs elements, OIG is requiring periodic reports from CBP on the status of the transferred investigations until each is closed. To date, ICE OPR has reported that it transferred about one-third of the cases it received to CBP-IA and has closed 60 cases. Also in June 2012, OIG transmitted 287 completed investigations involving unknown subjects to the relevant DHS component for appropriate action. Because the cases were completed, OIG is requiring no follow-up. We appreciate the Subcommittee's attention and interest in OIG's criminal investigative work. We will continue to pursue collaboration with all our law enforcement partners to ensure employee corruption does not jeopardize Homeland Security. Chairman Platts, this concludes my prepared remarks. I would be happy to answer any questions that you other members may have. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. I appreciate your testimony. Commissioner Aguilar, before you begin, I just want to recognize, as I referenced, appreciate the service of all three of you. But knowing, as we've talked, of your now over 34 years of service, I want to especially thank you for your service and leadership to our nation and all of our citizens, and that dedication, especially in such an important role with border protection. So please proceed.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman Platts, Ranking Member Towns, and distinguished members of the Subcommittee, thank you for the invitation to speak about the ongoing collaboration, the great collaboration, I believe, between U.S. Customs and Border Protection, DHS's Office of Inspector General, and Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Our efforts to combat corruption and maintain integrity within our ranks are critically important to CBP and to the public that we serve. I'd like to begin by recognizing the commitment, the bravery, vigilance, honor, and the character demonstrated by the overwhelming majority of CBP agents and officers who put their lives on the line every day to protect our nation. CBP has more than 60,000 employees, including over 47,000 uniformed agents and officers who carry out CBP's critical mission of securing our nation's borders while expediting lawful trade and travel. We recognize that public service is a public trust. That public service is a public trust is at the forefront of our interest. At the center of CBP's core values is integrity, and it is of the utmost importance that all of our employees are guided by the highest ethical and moral principles. Tragically, embarrassingly, a small number within our ranks have disgraced, dishonored the proud men and women who serve honorably and with distinction each day to protect our nation. Although the number of CBP employees who have betrayed the trust of the American public and their peers is a fraction of 1% of our workforce, we continue to focus our efforts on rooting out this unacceptable and deplorable behavior. One act of corruption is one too many. It is unacceptable. CBP prides itself on being a family. However, when one member of this family strays into criminality, he or she cannot go unchecked and without consequence. Our most valuable and we recognized sometimes vulnerable resource has been and will continue to be our employees. They are key to our success in protecting this nation. And it must be emphasized that no act of corruption within our agency can or will be tolerated. Collaboration amongst us, seated at the table here, is key to combating corruption and other forms of serious misconduct. We rely on our partnerships with the Office of Inspector General, with ICE, with FBI to work towards this common goal. In December of 2010, CBP and ICE executed a memorandum of understanding that established protocols for agents with CBP's Office of Internal Affairs and ICE's Office of Professional Responsibility to collaborate in the investigation of CBP employee-related misconduct and corruption. CBP and ICE are jointly working currently over 300 cases, many of which are a result of a transfer that Mr. Edwards just talked about that came about as a result of our May 2012 agreement. To date, ICE's Office of Professional Responsibility and CBP's Office of Internal Affairs have closed over 60 of these cases. In August of 2011, CBP entered into a similar MOU with the DHS OIG and deployed 14 CBP internal affairs agents to OIG offices across the United States. This had never happened before. Today, CBP internal affairs agents are working side by side with DHS OIG agents on approximately 90 CBP employee-related investigations of alleged corruption and misconduct. Collaboration with our DHS partners has greatly enhanced our effectiveness and has given CBP leadership unprecedented insight into the threat that potentially corrupt employees may pose to the homeland, giving us the opportunity to make adjustments to look at our processes and instill new workforce policies in order to avoid any kind of corruption. Consistent with ICE and OIG efforts to pursue criminal investigations, CBP is also striving to more effectively use administrative authorities that rest within our capabilities to mitigate the threat caused by CBP employees accused of corruption during the course of an investigation. This may include reassignment to administrative duties, administrative leave, indefinite suspension, suspension of law enforcement authorities, or other appropriate actions. This forward-leaning approach provides CBP with the flexibility to address the threat posed by employee corruption and misconduct in a manner that reduces the impact on the agency, our mission, and the responsibilities to the American public. Chairman Platts, Ranking Member Towns, members of the subcommittee, again, we thank you for the opportunity to testify today. Integrity is a great cornerstone of everything that we do at CBP on a daily basis in protecting this nation. I look forward to addressing any questions that you might have of us.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Ragsdale.
Good morning. Thank you. Chairman Platts, Ranking Member Towns, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, on behalf of Secretary Napolitano and Director Morton, thank you for the opportunity to appear today and discuss the ways in which ICE upholds DHS's standards for integrity and professionalism. With more than 20,000 employees in 72 offices around the world, ICE is the second largest federal investigative agency. ICE promotes homeland security and public safety through criminal and civil enforcement of federal laws governing border control, customs, trade, and immigration. While the vast number of ICE and DHS employees perform their law enforcement and other duties with honor every day, isolated acts of employee misconduct do sometimes occur. As noted in my written testimony, ICE's Office of Professional Responsibility is a robust program with over 500 employees and 252 special agents trained to investigate border crime and misconduct offenses. ICE's Office of Professional Responsibility works closely with our partners in DHS and CBP to ensure that a vigorous process exists to ensure the integrity of our shared mission. To build on the partnership between DHS-IG, ICE, and CBP, 2 MOUs were executed to ensure close collaboration among the agencies. In December 2010, ICE and CBP entered into a memorandum of understanding that assigned CBP internal affairs personnel to ICE OPR to assist in investigations of CBP employee criminal misconduct. In August 2011, the IG and CBP executed a similar memorandum of understanding. I can candidly say that we did not always have this level of collaboration. However, I'm proud to report that the MOUs have reinforced ICE's commitment to providing complete and timely awareness in cases involving criminal misconduct by DHS employees. One example of the collaboration with our partners was found in the investigation of former CBP officer Devon Samuels in Atlanta. This individual used his position of trust to bypass TSA security measures to smuggle drugs, money, and guns for a Jamaican drug trafficking organization. ICE partnered in this effort with CBP's Internal Affairs and the DHS-IG and federal, local, international, and private partners. The investigation led to 17 arrests and the seizure of 15 guns, a kilogram of cocaine, more than 300 pounds of marijuana, 250,000 units of ecstasy, and $250,000 in U.S. currency. Samuels ended up being sentenced to 8 years in jail. Likewise, in an ICE OPR-led case with support from the FBI, former ICE Special Agent Joanna Dees was criminally convicted for abusing her position of trust to share information from law enforcement databases with members of a drug trafficking organization. Following this ICE-led investigation, she was arrested, pled guilty this February to a 21-count indictment, and resigned her position. She was recently sentenced to 2.5 years in jail. While not every case involves the kind of allegations I just described, we regard every example of employee misconduct as potentially undermining our critical mission, and we take every matter that comes to our attention seriously. As you know, as part of our continuing commitment to effective law enforcement, In May 2012, the DHS IG transferred approximately 370 cases to ICE regarding criminal and administrative misconduct allegations. ICE and CBP promptly began working to determine the next investigative steps needed in each case. Since we received the cases, ICE has transferred 155 non-criminal cases to CBP for administrative action and returned 4 to the IG. 195 cases remain open with ICE OPR with assistance from CBP IA. Further, I am proud to note, as the Commissioner said, our partnership with CBP has already been effective in closing over 60 cases. As we strive towards swift resolution of these cases, regardless of the outcome, we look forward to resolving the remaining cases as efficiently as possible. We are heavily invested in addressing all issues of misconduct to ensure that ICE upholds public trust and conducts its mission with integrity and professionalism. I am proud of the honesty of the overwhelming majority of ICE employees and assure you that the rare cases of employee misconduct are dealt with swiftly and fairly. Thank you again for the opportunity to address you today, and I welcome any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ragsdale. I'll yield myself 5 minutes for the purpose of questioning and kick things off. General Edwards, I'll start with you in the sense of just the overall big picture and the number of cases. As I referenced in my testimony, the number of open cases that remain, and now over 2,000 for several years. In your written testimony as well as here today, in talking about the demands on your workforce and a significant increase in the number of open cases in recent years, and there's a chart that shows the number of open cases kind of spiking up here, whereas the number of closed cases is a more pretty level. Is it fair to say that one aspect of the number of open cases is related to the huge ramp up in border protection officers, customs? So we have many more personnel out there, and with more personnel comes a greater risk, especially with the type of enemy that they're dealing with here, the drug cartels and terrorist organizations, what we're guarding against. First, that the amount of increase in that workload is directly due to the increase in the size of these component entities.
Thank you, Chairman. Let me start by saying that the vast majority of CBP employees are not having this corruption issue. CBP has increased, Border Patrol has increased well over 38% in the last several years, and OIG has remained relatively flat. Yep. OIG is fully supportive of the President's budget. However, we have been asking for resources over the last several years. As of July 15th, we have 1,591 open cases. We have done a number of things internally, and also a number of things we have, according to and based on Secretary Napolitano's leadership, both Director Morton and Commissioner Aguilar and myself met to force multiply and get more resources to address the cases. Out of the 1,591, there's 661 employee corruption, and there's about non-employees 473, and a majority of them, 457 of them, are unnamed subjects. We have done a number of things internally. One is when we have tried to vet this, churn out the unnamed subjects to a potential lead, and then we still kept holding on to it. What we have done now is when we cannot get any further with that, we have closed that. That was the 287 that we transferred to ICE on the second round. We were holding it and trying to see if we can come up with more information, but it's not getting us anywhere. So that was holding us up. The other thing is also, the way we categorize our cases, we have opened and closed. When you look at the number of cases that's open, a lot of these cases, well over 70% of these cases are open less than 2 years. But what we found was, or what we are finding is, a number of these cases we have done the investigative work, and we are waiting for the U.S. attorneys for some judicial action. And so now we have categorized our system to better capture that. So these are some of the internal things we are doing, and also working with our partners, with the Commissioner and John Morton, we are able to force multiply and work the cases. So there's no backlog. We have this under control.
let me come back to that about the backlog. Internally, you have requested additional funds for more investigation-related personnel, but that's not been included ultimately in the decision what's submitted up here as far as the President's budget.
Right. Every year since 2009, I've been requesting 50 investigators.
Yeah. As far as not having a backlog, with the over 1,500 still open, and again, recognizing the limitation of your resources, there's only so many, investigators you can assign to pursue these cases. What would constitute a backlog? I mean, if it's over 2,000, or I mean, at what point do you have a backlog that each of these cases? Because I don't think of the ones that are open are all 1,500 plus actively being worked.
Yes, sir.
So none are sitting waiting for attention.
No, sir.
Okay.
What has happened, as you indicated earlier, out of the 2,061 open cases, our average caseload for an agent was well over 12 cases per agent. These were some of the most complex. If it's a FEMA disaster relief fraud case, an agent can hold up to 22 to 25 cases. But every one of these cases were worked, but it's just the volume of it was too much for them to handle. And then we were also holding on to these unnamed subjects. So working with this partnership, we were able to transfer some of these, but there's not been any case that's been in a backlog or pending or not being investigated.
Okay. Mr. Ragsdale, of the 270 some or 280 or so cases that were transferred back most recently, that were the ones that were unnamed and that ICE kind of ran the distance on them, couldn't find anything transferred back, where do those stand now with ICE? Are they still being looked at as to see if you can identify other leads, or are they being closed out? What's the status?
Well, that's exactly right. That we are obviously looking at every case to make sure that there's no investigative steps that are outstanding. But as the Inspector General said, at least in the IG's view, those cases should be closed. So we will obviously do just a quick independent look to see if there's any logical next steps that could be gleaned from our vantage point. And if not, then they'll be closed.
Quick final questions. I'm way over my time before I go to the ranking member. To all three of you, are you aware of any cases that, because of the volume and the increase, without the increase in staffing to account for the increase in volume, that a statute of limitation on a possible criminal charge has run because of just the inability to get all the way through that case in a timely fashion?
No, sir. It's the agent's responsibility and the manager at the local office to make sure that they work with the U.S. Attorney's Office to make sure that the statute of limitation does not run out. If there is a potential for that to happen, we all working with our components, we always start working the HR piece of it so the administrative action can take place. We haven't gotten anywhere where the statute of limitation has run out.
And so when you talk about the open cases with the U.S. Attorney's Office and kind of waiting, it's not to the point where you're waiting and while you're waiting, a statute's running. If you're tracking that so that as if you're getting close, it gets a higher attention, trying to make sure that the charge is properly filed and the statute's told.
Absolutely, sir. And another thing we have done internally with our case management system is an agent is supposed to submit a memorandum of activity when he meets with the U.S. Attorney's Office to get an update or work the case to see where it is. That information needs to be uploaded into our case management system, and his or her immediate supervisor should also be approving that. We also have the ability at headquarters in DHS OIG now to randomly go and select, and we also have alerts in place, so we are aware of this and make sure that we take active steps. But also one point, sir, is while we're working, because many times the U.S. Attorney, would require us to get multiple transactions to prove an intent. But just in case the U.S. Attorney does not accept it, we get the components involved early on, so the HR piece of it can start, so we're not waiting to the tail end to do that part of it.
Okay. And Commissioner Aguilar, Mr. Ragsdale, as far as your knowledge of any cases where the statute has run? Are you familiar with any?
From the ICE OPR perspective, we have not seen any cases where the statute of limitations is run in the criminal context. And as the IG said, the administrative context does not have an applicable statute of limitations. So from our perspective, we have not seen any cases that have become stale because of the statute.
Okay.
My response would be the same, as that we count on the case management and our two partners here.
Great. Thank you. Yield to the ranking member for purpose of questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me just ask all of you, how have the MOUs improved the working relationship and information sharing between your organizations? Has it helped? Right down the line, Mr. Edwards, right down, yes.
Thank you, sir. Absolutely. There is absolutely no turf battles between OIG, CBP, or ICE, or the Bureau. We, sitting up at the component head level, we have excellent working relationship. We need to put that in writing and make sure that the agents at the field office level work well together. We just have to have a process in place. And getting this MOU to work together, because if you look at it, it's a DHS problem, and we have to address this together. If you don't have the resources, we have to use the force multiplier. And having this MOU signed with CBP really has enabled CBP agents to work under our supervision, but also has given the Commissioner meaningful information that he was looking for. Because getting rid of an employee is not just the immediate solution. If, for example, if you have a weed, just pulling out the weed isn't going to help. You need to get to the root of the problem. And working jointly with us and sharing that information to the Commissioner has been very fruitful.
Mm-hmm. So duplication is not a problem?
Well,
go ahead.
There's no duplication, sir, because we are trying to avoid that. That's why, we are working together. We are working the same case. There's well over 90 cases, as the Commissioner talked about, that we're working together. They're not working independently, or we are not working independently. We're working jointly together under our authority. So one, the IG's independence is never sacrificed. We are transparent. At the same time, the Commissioner gets meaningful information on where the cases are.
Congressman, I would answer your question in the following manner. The current relationship that we have between our three organizations is unprecedented. The level of transparency, both on the quantity, the type of issues that we're facing, the cases that we're facing, and the qualitative efforts ongoing between us is we've never seen before. As to the duplication effort, because of the relationship that we have, it provides for deconfliction at the lowest level and at the earliest time in any one of these cases. So it gives us and CBP an insight that we've never had before, gives us the ability to act as quickly as possible in support of removing any possibility of integrity lapses, ethical lapses, and things of that nature. So I am very happy to report that we are at a level that is tremendous. I think all of us would agree that we have some challenges ahead of us, but with the processes in place, we have good processes in place to continue chipping away at the things that may challenge us in the future.
It's encouraging, yes.
And I would just add that what the MOUs do is balance very nicely some competing interests. If either the IG or ICE OPR has a criminal case open on an employee, we certainly want to balance the integrity of that investigation to make sure that it is secure in itself. Having said that, there has to be transparency to CBP and ICE managers to make sure that the extent that employees' ability to damage border or security is limited. So we see a very nice balance in these MOUs that balance those competing interests. And certainly from the ICE perspective, as we know that employee corruption does not exist in a vacuum, and as we look at transnational border crime, ICE Homeland Security investigations often has parallel investigations that may in fact be an umbrella of a criminal strategy of which the employee misconduct is only one piece. So we're seeing a very good level of coordination among us, as well as sort of a very integrated strategy to make sure that the employee misconduct is not allowed to sort of damage border security.
Let me put this properly. Have you evaluated overall trends or patterns of corruption that could lead to problems? Have you looked at that in any way? The overall pattern, I guess you, Mr. Edwards, the overall pattern in terms of the trends that have led to corruption, that you could point to something specific?
Well, if you look at the CBP or the Board of Corruption, the drug cartels have the resources, the money, and they have the technology, and they want to infiltrate DHS employees. Not only just getting to one corrupt employee, and corrupting the employee could be for the employee could be going through financial difficulties, gambling, debts, or sexual infidelity. And the drug cartels know this, so they target this one employee. So just by getting rid of that one employee is not a deterrent, because you need to make sure these law enforcement officers, there's a process in place, and if there's corruption, the penalty is you're going to be, hopefully serving time. So just getting rid of the employee is not going to be helpful. And also, like I indicated earlier, we need to get to the root of the problem and see what is causing that and get rid of that. So as we're looking at, but at the same time, there's just a small percentage of entire CBP workforce, so I don't want to say that entire CBP is a problem. There's just a very small number, and these small numbers are getting influenced by the drug cartels.
You think any kind of special training would make a difference? I mean, I'm trying to... Yes.
Congressman, you've asked some very, very pertinent questions here, and if I might, and this goes to one of the questions that the Chairman asked. The successes that we have had in hardening the borders to the degree that we have and making them as safe as they are today, which, by the way, they're safer today than they have been in decades, has caused some of the situations that we're looking at. The Chairman's question as to the escalation. In my years of service, it used to be that what we used to worry about the most was the dopers, the alien smugglers, the coyotes basically walking around us, getting around us, because there was just not enough of us in physical presence, in technological capability, investigators and things of that nature. We, as a country, we have ramped up our capability tremendously over the last 8, 9 years, especially over the last 2 to 3 years. What that has caused now is because they can no longer go around us, below us, over us, because we're in the water, we're in the air, we're actually have tunnel detection and things of that nature. Now they come at us directly towards our employees, trying to corrupt us. So that's one of the reasons. So our successes is part of the issue here. So we need to recognize that. And then every time that we take a look for developing trends, we look at the stats, we look at the numbers, we look at activities and things of that nature. Some quick stats that we've looked at. Of the 141 cases, the average time in service of the officers that have fallen by the wayside is about 9.2, 9.3 years in service. We took a look at the time frame of the so-called hiring surge between 2006 and 2009. A total of 21 employees hired during that time surge are part of that 141. Very small compared to the over 9,000 in the Border Patrol that we hired. So we take a look at those trends all the time. One of the most important things that we do, which goes to the latter part of your question as to training or anything else that we take a look at, is we now take a look and deconstruct at every opportunity each one of these corruption cases, looking to whether it was a failure of the individual to go corrupt, and if so, was there a failure on the part of leadership on procedural processes that we need to take a look and make adjustments in order to tighten up a process, or is it an organizational process that we need to take a look at? So we're constantly looking for those trends and for ways to address it. One of the things that we often do is focus on what I would call the obvious. When we take the actions that we take on investigating allegations, we need to do that, and we need to do better, and we need to do more. That is what I refer to as the reactive portion of our responsibility. Again, I reiterate, do better and do more, as we're doing today. But more importantly to me from an organizational standpoint is taking a look at what we can do preemptively, what we can do proactively to constantly be persistent in trying to prevent integrity lapses or corruption situations. Do more of the reactive, and then do a heck of a lot more in the area of sustaining a culture that is just not accepting of any lapses in integrity and corruption.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank the gentleman.
Say something, Mr. Ragland?
The only thing I would add is I think one of the things that we've seen as we look at sort of border crime and sort of transnational criminal organizations, one of the reasons why we are particularly effective at locating what is thankfully a very small number of employees is that the folks in ICE OPR come from Homeland Security investigations where they are trained already to investigate border crime. So we see a technique here to exploit employees, as the Commissioner said, because of the hardening and security that exists in the border now. So as we look at sort of drug trafficking organizations and alien smuggling organizations' ability to move both contraband and people across the border, we see this as a technique, and we see these robust misconduct investigations as in the larger strategy to combat transnational crime.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your generosity.
You're welcome. Now you go to the distinguished gentleman from Texas, Mr. Farenthold.
Thank you very much. I'd like to first start ask Mr. Edwards kind of a Texas-based question, but it also has huge national implications. The DHS OIG is under grand jury investigation for falsifying documents out of the McAllen office. Can you give us an update, understanding that there is obviously litigation involved, as to what has happened, what's happening there, and what has happened to the personnel in that office?
There's a criminal investigation by the Department of Justice, and I'm not at liberty to comment on that, sir. I would be glad to come by and talk to you at a private setting.
Can you tell us what's happened to the agents there? I mean, Center for Investigative Reports has said, I think 11 of them are on administrative leave and others are being transferred. Can you tell me if that report is accurate?
There are 8 people on administrative leave.
Yeah. Well, this is my concern is you've got to be very worried when the watchdog organization is having some problems. Do we have an issue where there is such a pressure to get cases turned out that we're doing sloppy work, or there's something being encouraging employees to take shortcuts?
Without getting into specifics of that investigation, sir, I want to point out that there's not an overload. There's not too many cases that an agent has to work. I have and we have put effective processes in place to ensure that our integrity of our cases are maintained. We have policies and procedures both from an agent perspective and also from a case management and a review process, that there's integrity in the work that we do.
Well, you know, with the number of investigations going on, not just within your organization, but within the government in general, you see a length of time it's taking, getting longer and longer. In a lot of instances, employees under investigation are on administrative leave, and we're basically paying them to sit at home. So obviously the delay is costing the taxpayers some money. Can you talk a little bit about the decision-making process, about what the OIG determines they're going to investigate versus what they refer back to the various internal affairs or professional responsibility departments of other agencies? What are the guidelines there, or the general principles that are in place?
According to the IG Act and the Homeland Security Act and our internal management directive, all employee corruption investigation, criminal investigation, comes to the OIG, and OIG opens these allegations and works these cases not by themselves. We work jointly with many of our partners. For instance, in the 1,591 cases I talked about that's open, we have about 18 cases we are working with the BCTF, even though we haven't signed an MOU there. We are working with the FBI on 142 cases, and we are working on a number of cases internally with ICE OPR and with ICE HSI and with CBPIA. So we open the cases, and if there are cases that we're not going to work them, we transfer them over to ICE OPR. But we still have very strict and stringent internal controls and reporting process to report back to us.
Now, does that leave you the resources? I always envision the way it should work is the Office of Inspector General is a big picture organization that's looking for waste, fraud, and abuse almost on an institutional basis, while the internal affairs is more towards an individual agent or officer. Do you have the resources to do investigations of the big picture? Is there enough resources for you or people in your office to be looking at the forest instead of just focusing on the trees?
Absolutely, sir. That's why we have taken a number of internal steps to better and streamline our processes internally, and also working with our partners within DHS. But at the same time, looking at the big picture, that's what our audit function does. They look at systemic issues, they look at programmatic issues, and that's also what our inspections division does. So apart from looking at a specific individual on an allegation that investigation looks, the overarching of our audit function, and there's not just at CBP or TSA or ICE, we look at DHS as a whole, and our audit function does a number of reports on that.
Thank you very much. I see my time has expired.
Thank the gentleman. Now recognize the distinguished gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Connolly.
I thank you. Mr. Ragsdale, your title is Acting Deputy Director?
It is.
Why are you acting?
I'm a member of the Senior Executive Service. I'm permanently in a different job at ICE, but I've been acting since June or early June.
But why isn't there a permanent Deputy Director?
The last permanent Deputy Director just left the post, and we are looking to see when the job will be filled permanently.
Mr. Aguilar, your title is Acting Commissioner.
Yes, sir.
Why are you acting?
My answer is very simple, sir. The commissioner that was nominated was not confirmed
By the U.S. Senate.
by the U.S. Senate back in December. The Secretary asked me to step in. I did back in January.
And Mr. Edwards, you're an acting Inspector General. Why are you acting?
Well, having a permanent Inspector General is desirable, but I can tell you, even as acting, I have not taken this job as acting for a day. I have ensured and made sure that I act very independent. The Secretary, Deputy, and all of the component heads treat me as being very independent.
No, Mr. Edwards, absolutely true. By all accounts, all three of you have sterling reputations and are doing a great job in service to your country and to the respective agencies. I'm asking a different question, though. Why don't we have a permanent, an Inspector General as opposed to an acting Inspector General?
There's no nominee yet, sir.
There's no nominee. Had there been one?
There was one, yes.
And what happened to that?
The Senate did not confirm.
Senate did not confirm.
Let me take back the Senate had a confirmation hearing, and they did not vote on it.
Did not vote on it. They must be very busy over there. That distracts them from their advice and consent role. I just want to ask each of you to comment on the relationship you have with the intelligence sections of your respective agencies. How would you characterize the relationship between, for example, DHS, Mr. Edwards, OIG investigators, and the intelligence sections, various intelligence sections of DHS?
Sir, I just want to go back. You asked me the question about the nominee. One last point I wanted to add to that question.
Sure.
The nominee to the press reporting withdrew herself. That's the latest on that.
Well, sometimes, though, if somebody, I can't judge the merits of the case, but a reasonable human being at some point is unwilling to put their life entirely on hold for months and months and months and years, and may very well decide to get on with their life and withdraw their nomination because it's just more than a mortal can bear.
Answering your question about working with the Intelligence Committee within DHS, I'm also part of the Intelligence IG Forum. So we do a number of inspections on the intelligence portion of DHS, but I'm also among the 15 or so IC community members. I'm an active member of that as well.
But I guess I'm asking a little different question, and I welcome Mr. Aguilar and Mr. Ragsdale to also comment on this. But in theory, if I'm doing highly classified intelligence work that needs to be carefully guarded in terms of what we're trying to do, and the mission is very important. I may not want some pain in the neck, IG staffer, coming into my shop and mucking around and perhaps, like an elephant in a china shop stepping on very fragile glass that we've worked so carefully to protect or create or whatever. And my cooperation might just be culturally wanting for reasons I think are good. Maybe you don't, but I don't mean I, the Congressman, but if I were in that situation, you could see how that mentality might develop. Is that a problem in getting cooperation from intelligence sections in respective agencies? Mr. Ragsdale?
Well, from our perspective, we understand our obligation as a component to respond to the IG. Certainly the IG, like ICE employees that have security clearances, in fact, make sure that those are appropriate at the appropriate levels to make sure the information flows freely. Again, the Inspector General sits in a unique place in the Department, and we have an obligation to respond. So I know of no problem in that regard. And if I just may also just add to your first question, this job is not a political appointment. It is not a Senate confirmation job. Thank you.
To your question, sir, specific to intelligence, I think all of us recognize the importance of intelligence to any kind of enforcement work that we are responsible for carrying out. In Customs and Border Protection, we actually took the affirmative act of not only creating, when we created our Office of Intelligence, but we created our Office of Intelligence and Investigative Liaison because of that recognition. So our head of intelligence has basically, and I'm going to say, daily ongoing contact with our investigative partners in order to ensure that any kind of intelligence that is gleaned either by us or by them is instituted in carrying forth our responsibilities, to include ethics, integrity, and corruption.
And just final point, I'm over my time, but Mr. Edwards, would you concur it really hasn't been that much of a problem? Cooperation?
Well, at the highest level, the cooperation is there. It is at the best level. I don't want to sit here and say that it's a perfect marriage. That's why we have IGs. IGs will go and say they're there to help, and really some people may not like that part of they're there to help. At the same time, if there are instances that there's not a cooperation, we have a resolution and deconfliction process. So overall, it's been a working very well in my tenure at DHS OIG.
Thank you very much. My time is up, Mr. Chairman, and thank you again for holding this hearing.
Thank the gentleman. Thank him for his participation. I'm going to yield to myself again for a second round, a couple of follow-up questions. One is, I guess, initially more of a comment, and Inspector General Edwards, you had stated earlier, absolutely no turf battles today, and that's, I think, an important message to be heard today, which probably 2 years or so ago might have been very different. And that's an important part of this hearing is, where are we, where we come from, where we're heading, and that is, I think, critically important. And then related to that, Commissioner Aguilar, you reference, again, the positive interactions and the MOUs and the cooperation and kind of more unprecedented understanding of cases that you have because of that cooperation. But you also said, yet we have challenges ahead of us. What would you, and then if I could ask the other two as well, each of you to identify, what are the greatest challenges as we go forward to maintain and further enhance the cooperation that's ongoing so that 2 years from now we're not back to where we have Department personnel, IG personnel saying, hey, there's no real relationship here, there's no cooperation, and that we don't revert back. So what are those challenges and how do we guard against going back?
I think one of the challenges that we have at this point in time is making sure that we do everything that we can to institutionalize what we have now come to recognize the right way of doing business. I lived this 2 years ago, and 2 years ago it was not a good way of doing business. When the component heads got together, decided to move forward, we started making some strides immediately. The advancements that we have made have been tremendous. There's a recognition on the part of us. More importantly, I think there's a recognition on the part of our people on the ground, the boots on the ground that really do the work. So it is continuing the relationship. It is building the institutionalization of these processes to ensure that we do not step back, regardless who is sitting at these chairs 5, 10 years from now.
Yep. And before the others answered, in reference to Mr. Conley's question in identifying all three of his acting, given the good direction we're heading with all three of his acting, maybe we don't want permanent. Yeah, maybe acting is good because we seem to be heading in that right direction and that cooperation, that three of you aren't just here at the table today together, but are interacting on a regular basis, and you're subordinates. So, and I think that is an important aspect is putting in place the structure.
Yes, sir.
So, as you well stated, whoever would be in these seats in the coming years, if it's not you, that we still have the same level of cooperation. General Edwards.
I totally agree with what Commissioner said. Having this MOU solidifies that. We have to continue in that direction. We cannot go back. But also, within DHS, we know it's an inherently DHS problem, and we're trying to address it. My hope is that I need to have an MOU with the Bureau. I've been.
I'm sorry, say that again, with the Bureau?
Yes.
Yep.
I've been working for the last several months, meeting with the officials from FBI, and I'm hopeful. We have agreement in the majority of areas, and as long as IG independence and transparency is attained, I'm really, really hopeful that we'll have a signed MOU that we all can work together jointly and get this, because it is a problem that we all need to address, and everybody's heart in the right place, and we just need to move forward.
Yeah. Mr. Ragsdale?
And I would just add also, as the Commissioner and the Inspector General said, what we certainly want to see is a complete codification of sort of the business practice that has led to an appropriate level of workload at each of our various components of the front end. So in other words, as we all staff the Joint Intake Center, or as we know as the JIC, we want to make sure that at the earliest possible stage, the cases are assigned out for early action. From the ICOPR perspective, we complete most cases, or at least for last year, in about 80% in about 6 months, and we're actually doing a little better so far in FY12. We want to make sure that we can continue to do that, and the way to do that is obviously to have sort of the cases separated as sort of as early as possible.
And that goes to, I guess, follow-up about the challenges that none of the three of you referenced, and that is the caseload and that early identification. And is it safe to say, IG, that the roughly 600 or so, the two turnbacks combined, that going forward, there's probably going to be an effort to better identify them up front or more quickly to go back versus holding them and then turning them back at a later date. Is that a fair statement about the approach?
Absolutely. I mean, we have given more authority to the SACs in the field. For instance, if there's a SAC and they have 10 agents and there's an average of about 9 cases a person, and the more allegations that comes in, rather than adding to the inventory, the SAC needs to make a quick, immediate judgment and assess it, and then look at the case details and transfer it over to ISOPR. So, system-wise, we have put process in place, and also this cooperation that we are venturing towards and want this to happen. I think this is a good way of addressing the cases now and in the future.
With the caseload that's come back, the number of cases that have come back, certainly it's increased significantly the caseload that your entities are handling. Do you envision at your level making requests for additional staff, investigators, as well as the IG has been making, at the department level?
One of the things that does make ICE somewhat unique in this situation is because we have between 6,500 and 7,000 special agents in Homeland Security investigation, ICE OPR is able to internally within ICE get extra investigative support sort of internally. in a sort of an era of sort of limited resources, we have to be very careful about sort of balancing requests for additional personnel. But we do have the luxury, at least for what I'll say is a sort of a built-in surge capacity at ICE that will let us sort of deal with this both now and going forward.
Great.
In the case of CBP, Chairman, we've got a total of about, as of this morning, about 199 investigators assigned to these types of cases. At the present time, I think between both entities here, we've got probably close to 50 officers, of those officers assigned to either one of these entities on either side of me. They serve as force enhancers to ICE and to IG. I believe that we could add some more to ICE and IG from within the ranks of the ones that we have now. So at the present time, I think we're in good shape.
Okay. Thank you. Inspector General Edwards, you talked about the 140-plus cases that you're currently working with the FBI, and then also about in working to try to get an MOU with the Bureau. How would you describe that relationship and where it is today versus a year ago? You've been in your position about a year and a half, maybe from when you came in to where it is today, and where you're trying to get with that MOU.
Right after I signed the MOU with Commissioner Burson, my next step was to work with the Bureau. So I met with the officials there and talked to them about the IG independence and also having an agreement with them, because in March of 2010, we didn't sign the BCTF MOU because it didn't take into account of IG independence. So I expressed my desire to work with them, and they seemed very interested and willing to do as well. But as we have progressed over several months, there are key issues that we're working, and I'm hopeful that we'll get that resolved. I'm hopeful before my tenure is up that an MOU is signed. But at the same time, at the field level, the 142 cases, whether it is the Bureau, DEA, ATF, ICE, or CBPIA, at the field level, the agents really work well together, because when you look down, there's only a few agents, they have to work together. The relationship is great. Even though we haven't signed the BCTF MOU, there are a number of places we are working cases together. It's just in the headquarters level, we need to come to an agreement, so we set a precedence in place that going forward, we're going to work this way and have a signed MOU, and I'm hopeful of that.
Okay. Thank you. My colleague from Texas talked about the McAllen situation. I realize you can't go into the details there, but also how it relates at the headquarters with the top two officials at the Office of Investigations being on leave as well. That is related to the ongoing investigations in the grand jury that's currently seated. Is that correct? Yeah. Yeah, I think that the approach of transparency as those investigations are concluded, then the more information is able to share what did transpire at that specific center, and then how the Department has responded to those allegations. A specific question as the type of investigations, just so I have a better understanding, criminal versus administrative. If each of you, or if one of you can appropriately explain, what's the difference in level of misconduct, and how, when we talk about in the testimony, there's a lot about the number of investigations, this many that were criminal and being pursued, but this many that were administrative. Where's that dividing line between administrative wrongdoing and criminal?
Well, let me start out, sir, by when we get an allegation, either through our DHS OIG hotline or any sources, or through the JICMAS, the Joint Intake Center. When we look at an allegation, essentially, if it is of administrative in nature and we are not going to work it, we call it Box 1, Box 2, and Box 3. We will send it to the component level and ask them to work it administratively.
And what would constitute that type of case?
Well, let's say somebody is cheating on a TNA, time and attendance. It's more of an administrative nature that the component needs to deal with. So they'll have their internal affairs component look into that, work it. But if it is something of administrative in nature, but it's at a higher level, the threshold is higher, then we'll ask them to investigate it administratively and then report back to us what the closure, what the outcome was. If it is criminal in nature, then we will take the case and then looking at the location where we are, suppose we are in South Texas and it's something to do with ICE HSI, then we'll work jointly with them because for that particular matter, ICE Homeland Security is better equipped because they're the subject matter expert, so we'll work with them jointly. So a lot of these cases, OIG is not working independently, they're working jointly with each one of the components or other law enforcement partners. We also have, we need to notify the Bureau within 30 days, the OIG and the Bureau, according to the Attorney General guidelines, when we open a case at the district that this case is being opened. So when we notify them, many times they'll want to work with us, or they'll get a lead and they'll ask us if they want to work with us. So the relationship was not the best, but it's getting better, and I'm hopeful that just like how we're sitting here together and saying that we are working well, my hope is that the Bureau would be sitting with us and say we all are working well together.
Is it fair to say that that line between administrative case being investigated and a criminal, it is a judgment call by your investigators that they're pilfering supplies, may be handled administratively, but if it got to a point where they're embezzling, not just supplies, but large amounts of equipment or something that get to a level that it would rise to a criminal? Is that a fair statement that there is a subjective determination here?
And based on our experience and cases in the past, there is a certain amount of judgment call one needs to make. And also at the end of the day, is the U.S. Attorney going to accept it?
So, okay.
Right. I would add that's exactly right. In other words, the investigation may not be clearly on its face either administrative or criminal. The special agent would take the case to the U.S. Attorney's Office for a charging decision, and recognizing that the Department of Justice, like every other agency, has limited resources. While the facts may sound both administratively or in a criminal violation, the resolution, just based on sort of the gravity of them, may sort of favor one or the other. And
that is my follow-up. There's probably a good number of cases that maybe could be pursued criminally, but they're at a level where that's not going to happen, but you still do pursue them with administrative punishment or repercussions internally?
That's exactly right. Just like there's a range of sort of ability to sort of investigate and sort of prosecute the conduct, it could either be through, again, a criminal prosecution or an administrative resolution that could lead to firing or a suspension.
Okay. Ed, did you have any other questions?
No further questions, Mr. Chairman, but I want to thank them because it's very encouraging to know that they're working together. I mean, because I think in government, as you know, a lot of times we waste resources because we just don't have a working relationship. We don't talk to each other. And so sometimes, we're involved in duplication and of course, you seem to have been able to sort of work that through and work it out. And then sometimes you have agencies that, they don't want to share. And they just want to do whatever they're doing and don't want anybody to, and a lot of times they're not even in the best position to even follow through or to carry it out. So to come this morning and to hear your work, you're working together, and that your memorandum of understanding is something that all of you respect, I want you to know that I'm really encouraged by that. However, when I look at the fact that 220,000 employees and only 219 investigators, I think I get a little nervous when I look at that. And I understand you said that you support the budget, but sometimes, we support when it's not in good for, really it's not the proper thing to do, but I think that's something that needs to be talked about, Mr. Chairman, and to see whether or not that's adequate for the 220,000, only to have 219 investigators. That seems to me to be inadequate, but here again, I think it's something that needs to be explored and looked at further. And I understand your position, Mr. Edwards. It's very clear to me, that you support the budget. I understand that, and I do understand it. But sometimes, we have to go beyond that. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman, and wrap up with one, again, a thanks to each of you for your testimony here today, your written testimony, but most importantly, day in and day out, your leadership of your respective components and the importance of what you're doing in a broad sense, and as you are focused on that more rare bad apple, and not just holding them accountable, but also because of the importance of what your department and component agencies' missions are. And so when that individual who is unfortunately corrupt is letting products come through that shouldn't, they may think it's less of a threat, but it might be weapons. If it's persons, it might be terrorists, not what they think just somebody, an illegal alien, but it might be an enemy of our nation. So all the more what you're doing is critically important. And Mr. Towns had just well captured that the message that you conveyed in our interactions, both staff and members, prior to the hearing and today is, I think, a very important message, and most importantly, most important direction that you're following, and that is, let turf battles be on the football turf or the soccer turf, not in public service and government, and to truly work hand in hand with each other. And that's clearly what you're seeking to do. And as the Commissioner said, there doesn't mean there aren't challenges yet to institutionalize this approach so it's pervasive and continuous. That's something we all up here, we certainly know the challenge of working to improve our cooperation. But I commend you for the approach you're taking, and very much thank you for your dedication to our nation and our citizens. And we will keep the record open for 7 days for any other materials. This hearing stands adjourned.